The nameless echo. From chaos, shadows awaken. The administratum auditor's carbonized remains kneel in the ash of what was once the Obsidian Raven's primary chapel, his augmetic fingers fused to a data slate that continues its grim testimony. The cracked screen displays a single entry, stark against the debris. Tithe variance plus 847.3%. This number serves as both epitaph and indictment, a mathematical confession extracted from the ruins of a fortress monastery that resembles less a sacked stronghold than a systematically emptied warehouse. Here lies our thesis, rendered in bone and decimal point. Corruption in the 41st millennium rarely announces itself with horns and tentacles. It whispers through requisition forms, multiplies in profit margins, and compounds through the very bureaucratic mechanisms designed to prevent it. The true heresy is not demonic possession but ledger manipulation, not chaos worship but the worship of efficiency itself. The Obsidian Ravens were forged as a blade. 6 centuries later, they had become a balance sheet. Founded during the 34th millennium as stalwart defenders of the Ghoul Stars trade corridor, they earned commendations for valor and maintained genetic purity across 15 generations. Their battle honors filled ceremonial volumes. Their tithe compliance rated exemplary for 400 years. Yet by the time Imperial forces breached their walls, the Ravens had transformed into the Imperium's most sophisticated economic predators, wielding bureaucratic weapons with the precision their ancestors reserved for bolter and blade. This investigation will trace that metamorphosis through surviving archives, witness testimonies, and the Ravens' own meticulously maintained financial records. We will examine how defending Imperial shipping evolved into controlling it, how emergency requisition powers became permanent extraction mechanisms, and how institutional blindness allowed systematic fraud to masquerade as innovative service for centuries. The evidence reveals a pattern of calculated exploitation disguised as administrative efficiency. Tithe convoys vanish from shipping manifests, while their cargo appears in chapter inventories marked as emergency requisitions. Gene seed trading networks operate under Imperial authority while violating sacred law. Protection services become indistinguishable from organized extortion, with raiders somehow knowing which vessels to avoid and which to target. Most disturbing is their prosperity doctrine, a theological framework that redefined service to the emperor in purely economic terms, transforming the sacred duty of protection into a profitable enterprise. The chapter learned to rename predation as optimization, theft as variance correction, and systematic fraud as resource management. In the auditor's grip, the data slate's power cell whines its death song. His timestamp marks a day the chapter erased from every chronicle, but numbers refuse to lie, regardless of how many purity seals they wear. What specific bureaucratic loopholes allowed a Space Marine chapter to operate as merchant princes? How did defending Imperial commerce transform into controlling it? The Ghoul Stars trade corridor spans 47 billion cubic kilometers across 17 systems, a vital arterial route funneling raw materials from frontier mining worlds to core manufactoria. When the Obsidian Ravens inherited this mandate in 847 M38, Imperial planners classified the region as moderately contested, bureaucratic euphemism for systematic violence with acceptable profit margins. The Ravens received authorization for 3 full companies to patrol this vast theater. Actual deployment records reveal a different reality. Reinforcements arrived 37 years late, carrying 60% of promised equipment. Supply convoys scheduled monthly materialized quarterly, their manifests consistently showing transport variance, that reduced ammunition shipments by half, while increasing administrative overhead by 200%. Fuel tenders arrived with casks half-filled, astropathic relays degraded to single-message weekly capacity, and munition holds audited at 52% of requisition. Yet tithe quotas for protected shipping remained unchanged. The institutional logic was familiar: central authority demanding constants from variables, obedience without sufficiency. Segmentum command issued orders to hold, protect, and deliver, while systematically underfunding the mechanisms required to achieve these objectives. The chapter adapted with characteristic efficiency. Emergency Powers Edict 847.M 38.23 granted temporary authority to requisition civilian assets during operational crises. The document defined emergency as any threat to Imperial shipping and temporary as lasting until threat conditions no longer existed. Given permanent pirate presence and Xenos raider activity, emergencies became operational constants. What began as tourniquet became garrote. Within 18 months, protection tribute agreements formalized relationships with major merchant houses. The system operated through elegant mathematics. Civilian vessels paid specified fees to the chapter in exchange for priority response to distress calls. Those declining such arrangements received standard Imperial Navy protection, response times measured in weeks rather than hours, assuming responses materialized at all. Merchant Captain Valen Thorne's private logs illustrate the calculation process. His house faced estimated 12% annual cargo losses to pirate activity, or could pay Raven's protection fees equivalent to 8% of gross revenue for guaranteed safe passage. Raven's protected convoys reported 0 losses, while unprotected shipping faced increasingly sophisticated attacks that somehow knew which vessels to avoid. The chapter's quarterly reports to Terra described protection tribute as voluntary civilian contributions to defense efficiency and requisitioned supplies as emergency asset optimization. Language satisfied Imperial auditors while obscuring fundamental doctrinal transformation occurring within Raven's operations. Scarcity had begun its alchemical work, transmuting defenders into extractors through the expedient of making survival dependent on commercial success. The chapter learned to view Imperial shipping not as charges requiring protection, but as resources awaiting exploitation. Each convoy represented potential revenue rather than sacred trust, each merchant house a client rather than a ward. The line between defender and predator blurred through institutional necessity. Survival requirements became business opportunities as the Ravens discovered that maintaining chapter strength, arming battle brothers, repairing vessels, funding operations was intrinsically linked to their new economic mechanisms. What did temporary requisitions become when emergencies never ended? How did merchant houses respond to protection that resembled extortion? Chief Librarian Vex possessed both the institutional memory to witness transformation and the scholarly apparatus to codify it. His treatise, The Prosperity Doctrine, emerged in 863 M38 as theological justification for commercial practices already 3 decades entrenched. Vex constructed remarkable intellectual architecture, a framework redefining sacred duty in economic terms, while maintaining doctrinal orthodoxy through systematic semantic manipulation. The document represents less innovation than rationalization, providing scriptural cover for behaviors that had evolved from necessity into institutional identity. The doctrine's foundational tenet declares wealth serves the throne. Vex argues that imperial strength flows from economic efficiency rather than martial valor alone. A prosperous chapter purchases superior equipment, maintains larger fleets, and extends protection across wider territories. Therefore, revenue-generating activities constitute devotional acts provided such wealth ultimately serves imperial interests. The logic appears unassailable until examined through implementation records that reveal chapter welfare superseding imperial considerations with increasing frequency. Waste dishonors the emperor forms the second pillar, establishing inefficiency as heretical behavior. Vex cites imperial guard regiments perishing from supply shortages while valuable cargo rots in undefended convoys. The emperor's resources demand optimal allocation, making chapter intervention in civilian commerce a sacred obligation. This principle justifies requisitioning underutilized civilian assets and redistributing them according to chapter calculations of necessity, calculations that increasingly favor chapter stockpiles over imperial distribution networks. The third cornerstone proclaims commerce is conquest by other means. Traditional warfare destroys value while commercial dominance creates it. Economic conquest preserves imperial resources, while extending chapter influence, representing evolutionary warfare methodology rather than abandonment of martial principles. Battle prayers adopted tariff metaphors. Chaplains anointed cogitators with sacred unguents while blessing quarterly profit assessments. From these tenets emerged tithe optimization protocols, systematic procedures for extracting maximum value from imperial shipping while maintaining technical legal compliance. The protocols identify regulatory gaps, exploit bureaucratic delays, and leverage emergency authorities to create profitable interventions in civilian commerce. Each protocol includes documentation templates framing extraction as protection, requisition as redistribution, and profit as efficiency measurement. Distress calls receive triage by revenue potential using Form LXI-77EE, Subclause 19A of the Emergency Powers Edict. Quartermaster Serf Hadrian exemplifies daily life under the new paradigm. His rations now fluctuate based on commercial performance metrics tracked through augmetic implants monitoring his efficiency in processing redistributed civilian cargo. Superior performance earns protein supplements and extended rest periods. Failure results in nutriment paste and additional duty shifts. The mess hall displays performance rankings alongside devotional scriptures. Serfs compete for efficiency bonuses while reciting prayers thanking the emperor for opportunities to optimize resource allocation. Their conversations blending theological discussion with margin calculations. The contradiction crystallizes in these daily interactions. Doctrine claiming to serve the emperor increasingly serves chapter coffers, with imperial welfare becoming secondary to revenue generation. Vex's theological framework provides intellectual cover for systematic transformation of sacred duty into profitable enterprise, but the gap between stated purpose and actual practice widens with each quarterly assessment. What happens when optimization protocols encounter imperial law? How do you maintain the fiction of service while pursuing profit? The Raven's protection economy operated through stamped parchments and calibrated fear. Merchant convoys entering the Ghoul Stars received vox liturgies alongside fee schedules, their transponder codes sorted into sanctified ledgers that determined survival probability. Pay the security tithe assessed as percentage of declared cargo value plus hazard multipliers, and your vessel joined the Priority Response Registry, sealed with chapter sigils. Decline, and your ship's identification entered different records, ones filed in shadow margins where response times measured in days rather than hours. Captain Thane's company exemplified this systematic coordination. His strike cruiser maintained security consultations with 17 known pirate captains, meetings disguised as prisoner interrogations in official reports while functioning as operational briefings. encrypted data slates, contained shipping schedules, cargo manifests, and escort strengths for vessels declining Raven's protection services. Pirates received 48-hour advance notice of profitable targets, while Raven's forces positioned themselves conveniently distant during attack windows, their delayed responses ensuring complete cargo seizure while maintaining plausible intervention timing. Protected vessels received markedly different treatment. Raven's escorts shadowed tribute-paying convoys at optimal intercept distances, broadcasting identification codes that pirate fleets recognized and avoided. These ships traversed the corridor unmolested, their captains filing post-voyage reports praising Raven's efficiency, testimonials that strengthened the chapter's reputation for reliable protection services. The Raider Rehabilitation Program provided elegant solution to prisoner disposal while expanding operational capacity. Captured pirates faced execution or chapter service, specifically continued piracy under Raven's oversight. Rehabilitation ceremonies involved ritual scarification, replacing pirate tattoos with Raven's iconography, while maintaining operational relationships with former crews. These penitent raiders became integrated assets, their intimate knowledge of shipping routes invaluable for optimizing both protection services and controlled predation. Merchant Captain Isolde Karev exemplified the calculation process, driving civilian compliance. Her quarterly assessments revealed brutal mathematics. Historical pirate losses averaged 12% annually, while Raven's protection cost 8% gross cargo value plus variable contingency offerings. Hidden costs, inspection delays, voluntary donations at anchorages brought actual expenses to 11%. She studied risk curves, examined message traffic from colleagues who had declined and vanished, and reviewed photographs of missing crews. Her conclusion crystallized into the corporate policy. Predictable extortion cost less than random violence. The moral mathematics hardened into institutional practice. The chapter wore imperial authority while operating sophisticated protection racket, filing every fee and countersigning every voluntary tribute with litanies about efficiency and stewardship. Attack patterns mapped almost perfectly to ledger status. Tribute-paying vessels experienced zero losses, while non-compliant shipping faced increasingly sophisticated raids that demonstrated uncanny familiarity with cargo manifests and defensive capabilities. Protection had become product, predation transformed into policy. The Ravens maintained technical compliance with Astartes' obligations by protecting Imperial shipping, but only shipping that paid for protection. They combated piracy, but only piracy threatening their revenue streams. Sacred duty evolved into profitable business model through systematic exploitation of Imperial authority. What happens when Imperial authorities investigate unusual shipping patterns? How do you explain why some convoys never face attacks, while others are systematically destroyed? Chapter Master Korak stood before gilt-framed Auspex screens, displaying metrics that confirmed his deepest convictions. Convoy throughput increased 12%. Distress response times reduced to 8 minutes. Piracy incidents trending negative across 17 systems. These numbers spoke devotional truth, sealed with purity scripts, and countersigned by captains whose reports employed identical sanctified phrases: protection fulfilled, waste abated, commerce secured. Korax believed the prosperity doctrine because his instruments validated it, showing him only what organizational filters permitted him to see. The command lattice sanitized reality through successive bureaucratic transformations. Squad logs became platoon abstracts, which became company synopses, which became chapter communiques. At each hierarchical level, abrasive details underwent doctrinal polishing. Coordination meetings with pirate captains became rehabilitation briefings. delayed responses enabling complete cargo seizure transformed into economy of force applications. Civilian casualties became crew attrition from hostile activity. The language was catechismal, engineered to withstand audit while soothing conscience. Every after-action report included mandatory catechism of intent, checkboxes requiring declarants to affirm defensive purpose, structurally preventing admission of predatory behavior at documentation points. The librarius maintained semantic matrices, flagging prohibited terminology, automatically replacing incriminating words with compliant synonyms before transmission to higher command. The reclusium stamped amended packets with benedictions of purpose. By the time reports reached Corax, they were doctrinally pure and empirically hollow. Cognitive restructuring protocols closed gaps between practice and identity through clinical psycho-conditioning integrated into routine maintenance cycles. Battle brothers experiencing moral dissonance received neurological adjustments, reframing contradictory experiences within acceptable doctrinal parameters. Hypno-indoctrination loops, mnemonic scarification, and pharmaco-rituals dulled psychological dissonance. Pain wards triggered when minds approached forbidden interpretations. Subjects woke, convinced that boarding non-compliant freighters constituted merciful acts performed swiftly to minimize waste. Brother Sergeant Helion exemplified individual-level conditioning effects. After spacing 12 unarmed engineerium hands who attempted to barricade a cargo hold, he reported auditory phantoms, hymns drowned by knocking sounds from bulkheads. His captain recorded post-combat reverberations and referred him for dissonance abatement under Protocol CRP 4.72. 3 nights of whispered Vox choir conditioning later, Helion returned to duty testifying that the Emperor despised inefficiency more than tears. Chaplain Viridian's encrypted personal journal revealed institutional pressure's psychological toll. Early entries celebrated innovative service methods and praised chapter economic efficiency. Gradual doubt emerged as he blessed increasingly questionable operations, consecrating cogitators coordinating pirate attacks, sanctifying weapons employed against Imperial civilians, offering thanksgiving prayers for successful civilian asset redistribution. His final entries described growing certainty that Raven's activities violated sacred oaths, but institutional mechanisms prevented meaningful dissent. Viridian's concerns, voiced during chapter conclaves, triggered systematic marginalization. He received reassignment to meditation duties on isolated fortress levels, while his doubts vanished from official records. The chapter maintained doctrinal purity through elimination of dissenting perspectives rather than examination of questionable practices. Organizational structures designed to preserve Astartes' honor instead enabled corruption by creating information silos, preventing comprehensive understanding of systematic criminal enterprise. This institutional blindness persisted through careful information management and psychological conditioning, creating sustainable criminal organization disguised as innovative imperial service. Compartmentalization kept individual hands clean, while the systemic machine operated through collective moral blindness. What happens when external observers bypass internal reporting structures? How long can institutional blindness persist when evidence mounts? Gene seed represents the galaxy's most precious commodity, each sample containing millennia of genetic perfection distilled into superhuman potential. The Ravens discovered that desperation transforms sacred heritage into profitable merchandise, with dying chapters paying astronomical sums for genetic salvation that might preserve their existence another generation. Apothecary Voss orchestrated these transactions from climate-controlled vaults, storing gene seed samples sorted by quality and market value. Superior specimens remained in Raven's stockpiles while degraded materials, samples showing genetic drift, cellular damage, or compatibility issues became export inventory for genetic consultation services marketed to struggling chapters through intermediary merchant houses. The Crimson Wardens exemplified typical clientele, reduced to 37 battle brothers after catastrophic gene seed failure. They approached Raven's representatives, offering their entire treasury for genetic material capable of restoring recruitment capacity. Voss met their apothecary aboard a decommissioned orbital station, conducting business through encrypted channels while maintaining fiction of Imperial cooperation between brother chapters. Batch Karen 31 appeared pristine in blessed containment cylinders bearing Raven's purity seals. The genetic material contained subtle flaws Voss knew would manifest in future implantations. Endocrine cascades spiking unpredictably under stress, osmodula expression lagging to create brittle bone structures, catalepsy node fluctuations producing micro-seizures that battlefields would interpret as hesitation. None of this appeared in accompanying documentation. The purity certification system legitimized transactions through systematic falsification. Raven's Tech Marines modified Auspex readings, generated counterfeit test results, and created fabricated Imperial genetic approval documents, complete with forged Mechanicus benedictions. Each certificate bore authentic-appearing seals, reference numbers traceable to genuine databases, and molecular signatures matching legitimate documentation. Purchasing chapters received materials appearing to meet highest purity standards while obtaining deliberately inferior genetic stock. The economic logic was brutal in its efficiency. Gene seed commanded prices exceeding planetary GDP, single samples worth more than entire guard regiments. The Ravens possessed extensive genetic stockpiles accumulated through centuries of successful recruitment, creating inventory for profitable export while maintaining operational capacity through retention of superior specimens. Market demand remained constant as chapters faced extinction from genetic degradation, combat losses, and recruitment failures. The transaction concluded with the Crimson Wardens paying 17 million throne gelt, plus territorial concessions for material that would doom their future recruits to shortened lifespans and compromised combat effectiveness. Voss called it genetic consultation, never sale. The fiction mattered for legal compliance and psychological comfort. Brother Apothecary Lear represented emerging institutional resistance. His concerns about selling flawed material to fellow Astartes reached Voss through routine confession protocols. Lear questioned whether genetic fraud violated sacred oaths to preserve Space Marine heritage, expressing doubt about transactions weakening other chapters while enriching Raven's coffers. His theological objections triggered immediate administrative response. Lear received reassignment to meditation duties in isolated monastery sections, while his concerns disappeared from official records. The chapter eliminated dissent through isolation rather than policy examination, ensuring continued profitability of genetic commerce while maintaining appearance of doctrinal compliance. The Ravens had transformed the most sacred aspect of Astartes' existence into commercial opportunity, treating genetic heritage as inventory rather than trust. Each transaction represented not just profit, but active sabotage of Imperial military capacity, disguised as brotherhood assistance. What happens to chapters that receive deliberately flawed gene seed? How does the Imperium track genetic material when record keepers are complicit? Inquisitor Valdris arrived bearing 17 encrypted data slates, documenting anomalies that defied probability. Shipping losses in Raven's protected zones showed coordination patterns, while cargo manifests from destroyed vessels appeared in chapter inventories months later. The statistical evidence demanded investigation despite Chapter Master Corax's protests about jurisdictional overreach and operational security concerns. The Raven's response revealed institutional transformation from defenders to predators. Counterintelligence operations deployed through established commercial networks, targeting investigation infrastructure with systematic precision. Administratum clerks received gratitude stipends while their children gained mysterious skull emplacements. Dock supervisors found pension accounts credited with unexplained bonuses. Those refusing cooperation experienced professional difficulties, transfer orders to hazardous postings, audit flags on personal finances, family members suffering convenient accidents. Witness elimination proceeded with military efficiency. A dockside factor who leaked scheduling data to Valdris suffered airlock malfunction documented as maintenance variance. Surviving crew members from attacked convoys disappeared entirely from Imperial records, their vessels experiencing engine failures in deep space. The chapter eliminated testimony through systematic violence disguised as operational accidents, treating murder as cost-effective problem-solving. Legal challenges multiplied through administratum contacts cultivated over decades. Raven's advocates filed territorial jurisdiction disputes, questioned Valdris's authorization scope, and demanded formal hearings before segmentum command. Each bureaucratic delay provided time for evidence sanitization while transforming criminal investigation into constitutional crisis. The chapter wielded Imperial law as defensive weapon against Imperial justice. The Scorched Ledger Protocol represented comprehensive evidence destruction, engineered to preserve operational capability while eliminating incriminating documentation. Primary databases underwent selective purging, transaction details vanished while operational summaries remained intact under casual inspection. Physical archives burned in plasma furnaces, while cogitators ran cascade scramble routines, leaving only devotional checksums. Gene seed trading records disappeared, replaced by falsified acquisition documents backdated to appear routine. The protocol erased criminal past while maintaining business present. Most disturbing was psychological transformation revealed through institutional behavior. The Raven's modified gene seed, conditioned through decades of commercial operations, now triggered hostile responses to Imperial oversight. Battle Brothers experienced physiological stress when authorities questioned chapter activities, their enhanced biochemistry interpreting investigation as territorial challenge. Requiring aggressive response, they viewed Valdris not as rightful supervisor, but as competitor threatening profitable enterprises. Captain Thane exemplified altered psychology during preliminary interviews, responding to shipping pattern questions as attempts to steal trade secrets and describing inquisitorial investigation as market manipulation. The chapter's corruption had fundamentally rewired their relationship with Imperial hierarchy. They served the Emperor only when profitable, obeyed his laws only when convenient. Their criminal activities had created institutional identity incompatible with traditional Astartes obedience, transforming sacred duty into commercial enterprise protected through violence and deception. What evidence survives the Raven's destruction protocols? How far will a Space Marine chapter go to protect their criminal enterprise? The massacre commenced at 1427 Terran Standard as Ravens strike cruiser Prosperity's edge, translated from Warp Shadow bearing counterfeit transponder codes and broadcasting pirate identification cant. Inquisitor Valdris's audit flotilla, 2 Navy frigates, 3 administratum archive haulers, and a chartered astropathic relay detected incoming contacts and assumed standard defensive postures, unaware they faced Space Marines rather than common raiders seeking easy salvage. Raven's boarding torpedoes launched with military precision while maintaining fiction of desperate pirate assault. Battle Brothers wore unmarked ceramite painted in scavenged colors, their bolters loaded with subsonic penetrators and chain blades, fitted with aftermarket guards to throw civilian bite patterns. Each warrior carried falsified identification implants, programmed with criminal histories, creating forensic evidence supporting the pirate narrative should Imperial investigators examine remains. Shaped plasma charges, signatures trimmed to resemble scavenged coils, flared against escort shields as grapnels bit into Imperial hulls. The first squads moved like equations through narrow corridors, cutting as little as necessary, killing as efficiently as required. Brother Sergeant Corvin's tactical squad eliminated communications personnel first, preventing distress transmissions while securing astropathic chambers. Helm cams remained dark. Only hand sign litanies passed between warriors. Margins, targets, timings. They performed sloppy professionalism, spent casings of incompatible manufacture, crude graffiti traced on hatch frames, deliberate inefficiencies designed to suggest criminal desperation rather than Astartes' precision. Captain Thane breached the flagship's bridge through smoke and extinguisher foam, his helm bare to show a face that offered no mercy. Imperial naval armsmen responded with disciplined las fire that sparked harmlessly off ceramite plate as Raven's forces advanced through killing zones designed to channel boarding actions. Inquisitor Valdris made his stand clutching a voxcaster, attempting final transmission to Terra, while firing his plasma pistol at advancing Astartes. Their confrontation lasted 17 seconds. Valdris recited oaths of duty while superheated discharge washed over Thane's advancing form. The captain's corrupted battle prayer represented complete doctrinal inversion. Blessed be the margin that spares the strong, anointed be the tithe that trims the waste, sanctified the hand that optimizes necessary commerce. His chain's words severed Valdris's head, while sacred litanies blessed profitable murder, the blade's teeth grinding through augmetic vertebrae as Thane genuinely believed his actions served Imperial interests by protecting chapter operations. The archive vault held data cores containing mathematical proof of systematic fraud, shipping schedules cross-referenced with attack patterns, financial transfers linking chapter accounts to merchant houses, gene seed transaction records bearing authentic purity seals, and testimony from surviving crew members describing Raven's coordination with pirate fleets. Tech Marines bypassed Ordo seals with cuts that left hinges intact for resale, discovering comprehensive documentation spanning 6 decades of criminal enterprise disguised as innovative Imperial service. Raven's forces swept deck by deck, executing crew members with bolt rounds to prevent survivor testimony while maintaining operational discipline through encrypted Vox channels. Imperial defenders died believing they faced desperate pirates rather than traitor Astartes. The massacre proceeded with clinical efficiency. Resistance contracted to isolated pockets as Ravens applied tourniquet and stim to useful witnesses while spacing unnecessary personnel through cargo airlocks like processed invoices. The chapter spent 47 minutes extracting valuable equipment while treating mass murder as business expense, justified by operational necessities. They salvaged cogitators, navigation arrays, weapons systems, and personal effects, worth millions of throne gelt, categorizing extraction under risk, amortization, and opportunity realization. Bodies collected at airlocks awaiting disposal while plasma charges prepared to reduce Imperial vessels to expanding debris clouds, eliminating physical evidence while creating additional salvage opportunities. But astropathic transmissions travel faster than warp-capable vessels. A junior astropath bleeding in a sealed compartment transmitted fragmentary warnings before discovery and silencing. A rating in a patched void suit drifted among inspection debris, memorizing names and counting minutes for someone who would ask later. Raven's forces departed, broadcasting false distress calls describing devastating pirate attack, while fragments of shipping data and massacre imagery reached Terra through psychic channels. What Imperial forces respond to the massacre of an inquisitorial fleet? How do you explain the disappearance of an entire audit mission? The Ravens did not fall to daemons. They fell to arithmetic. Their spiritual corrosion followed institutional logic rather than warp-tainted revelation, representing heresy achieved through ledger books instead of demonic influence. Over 2 centuries, systematic conditioning transformed sacred warriors into commercial predators through selective pressure that rewarded acquisitive behavior over martial duty. Apothecarian records document physiological adaptation unprecedented in Astartes' history. The Raven's gene seed evolved to prioritize resource acquisition, with neural pathways originally designed for tactical assessment now triggering biochemical satisfaction from successful negotiations. Enhanced cardiovascular systems responded to profit calculations as if confronting Xenos threats. Os modula development showed increased cranial density in regions associated with mathematical processing, while muscle fiber distribution optimized for extended cogitator operation rather than sustained combat. The Becher's gland produced modified secretions, enhancing persuasive speech during commercial transactions. Their bodies literally became tools of commerce rather than instruments of war. Companies became trade divisions, with portfolios rather than battlefields. The first company specialized in high-value logistics interdiction, while subsequent divisions managed asset recovery and client assurance. Chaplains ceded authority to efficiency coordinators who delivered sermons about blessed margins and sanctified optimization, their litanies praising market forces as expressions of imperial wisdom. The reclusium transformed into the office of moral accounting, balancing piety credits against operational shortfalls using formulae whose variables could be purchased. Brother Decay exemplified personal-level transformation, returning from unprofitable patrol that rescued non-subscribing pilgrims. His shattered arm entered repair queues behind 3 battle brothers who had secured lucrative gene seed consultancies. Sacred brotherhood degraded into business partnership, where mercy became liability requiring commercial justification. Decay signed onto the next client assurance strike to advance his medical priority. Survival itself commodified through performance metrics. Sacred concepts underwent systematic commercialization. Battle brothers received performance bonuses, enhanced rations, artificer upgrades, priority medical care based on revenue generation rather than martial excellence. Penance became inventory audit. Confession meant disclosing unmonetized opportunities. The catechism of intent functioned as pricing model. Actions frameable as protection could be invoiced. If invoiced, they could be blessed. Even mourning followed commercial calculus. Fallen warriors received larger memorial etchings when operations closed in surplus. This corruption proved more insidious than chaos worship, because it maintained imperial forms while hollowing out imperial substance. The Ravens served the emperor, but only when service cleared balance sheets. They defended imperial law, but only when compliance proved cost-effective. Sacred duty became conditional service, dependent on market forces. The emperor remained their patron as business deity rather than sacred father, his blessing invoked for profitable ventures rather than righteous causes. Their transformation represented institutional apostasy disguised as innovative service, not rejection of imperial authority, but its complete commodification, creating warriors who measured worth through throughput rather than vows fulfilled. What happens when profit motive completely replaces duty as organizational principle? How does the Imperium respond to heresy disguised as entrepreneurship? Apothecarian records from the Obsidian Ravens reveal biological transformation unprecedented in Astartes' history. What began as institutional corruption had rewritten the very genetic code that defined Space Marine existence, creating warriors whose enhanced physiology served commercial rather than martial functions. The gene seed, sacred inheritance of millennia, had adapted to optimize for profit acquisition over battlefield supremacy through systematic selective pressure that rewarded mercantile success above martial excellence. Brother Apothecary Voss's classified medical assessments document systematic neural pathway modification across the chapter's battle brothers. Enhanced memory centers expanded to accommodate complex financial calculations, while traditional tactical assessment regions contracted through disuse. Cranial scans revealed synaptic density in economic reasoning centers, exceeding combat reflexes by 43%. The Ravens could instinctively calculate profit margins with greater precision than threat assessments, their minds processing market data faster than battlefield intelligence. Neural chemistry rewarded successful negotiations with biochemical cascades identical to combat stimulation, creating warriors who experienced greater physiological satisfaction from closing profitable deals than eliminating enemies. The Mucranoid developed unprecedented sensitivity to precious metals and rare materials, allowing battle brothers to detect valuable cargo through standard hull plating. Enhanced olfactory systems identified quality variations in trade goods with greater precision than approaching hostiles, while modified optical nerves processed financial documentation faster than tactical displays. Brother Sergeant Corvin reported distinguishing between different coin denominations purely through acoustic signature, his enhanced hearing calibrated for commercial rather than combat applications. These adaptations transformed sacred senses into commercial instruments optimized for resource acquisition. Physical changes proved equally dramatic. Os medulla expression shifted toward cranial reinforcement, supporting extended cogitator operation rather than combat resilience. Muscle fiber distribution optimized for fine motor control during negotiations, while gross motor combat effectiveness diminished. The Laraman's organ responded more efficiently to paper cuts from contract handling than battlefield wounds, demonstrating biological priority reallocation from warfare to commerce. Most disturbing, the catalepsian node triggered during accounting sessions rather than combat vigilance, indicating fundamental rewiring of survival instincts. Battle Brother Thane's personal logs reveal the psychological toll of physiological transformation. He described experiencing genuine physical pleasure, endorphin surges, and elevated heart rate upon successful transaction completion, while feeling diminished responses during actual combat. His enhanced biochemistry created stronger emotional bonds with cooperative merchant clients than with battle brothers from other chapters. Sacred fraternity degraded through commercially optimized neural chemistry. Withdrawal symptoms manifested during extended periods without commercial activity, depression, anxiety, and physical tremors that standard Astartes conditioning protocols could not address. Traditional gene seed corruption treatments proved ineffective against market-adapted biology. The Raven's modifications represented evolutionary development rather than pathological degradation, creating medical challenges without precedent in Astartes' history. Enhanced physiology craved commercial stimulation the way normal gene seed required combat, creating dependency cycles that reinforced mercantile behavior through biological reward mechanisms. Brother Apothecary Lear's concerns about treating commerce addiction using standard purity protocols resulted in his reassignment to meditation duties before solutions emerged. Unlike chaos corruption, which theoretically permitted spiritual cleansing, the Raven's commercial adaptation represented permanent evolutionary change. Their gene seed had become a new subspecies, optimized for economic warfare rather than military conquest, creating warriors whose sacred biology served profit margins rather than imperial duty. They remained space marines in form while becoming merchant princes in function, their enhanced bodies literal tools of commerce rather than instruments of war. What happens when Astarte's physiology optimizes for profit rather than combat? How do you maintain military effectiveness when your body craves commerce? The astropathic fragments from Valdris's dying flotilla triggered coordinated imperial response across 17 systems as multiple agencies recognized the Ravens represented unprecedented institutional threat. Battlefleet Obscurus deployed 3 battle groups, establishing comprehensive blockade of Ghoul Star's trade routes, while Iron Hands and Imperial Fists strike forces prepared planetary assault operations. The mobilization scale reflected Imperial understanding that systematic corruption required surgical excision, not mere punishment but complete eradication of commercial heresy disguised as innovative service. Admiral Castrius positioned heavy cruisers at mandatory translation points, while destroyer squadrons swept secondary routes, creating impermeable cordon around Raven's territory. The blockade targeted commercial infrastructure rather than military assets, recognizing that chapter strength flowed from economic networks rather than traditional martial power. Imperial forces intercepted merchant vessels carrying tribute payments, confiscated manifests documenting systematic fraud, and arrested civilian collaborators whose testimonies revealed decades of institutionalized extortion. Each captured freighter severed Raven's revenue streams while providing additional evidence of criminal enterprise. The Raven's corruption initially provided significant defensive advantages. Merchant allies transmitted Imperial fleet movements through encrypted trade channels, while compromised administratum officials leaked operational details and delayed supply requisitions. Modified physiology granted unique capabilities. Enhanced pattern recognition from market analysis allowed prediction of Imperial fleet movements with uncanny accuracy, while ability to detect valuable materials extended to identifying weaknesses in Imperial command structures. One freighter, ostensibly carrying medical supplies to Imperial forces, detonated in Battlefleet Obscurus dockyard as final act of commercial loyalty transformed into terrorism. Facing military encirclement, the Ravens deployed their ultimate weapon, systematic bribery on unprecedented scale. Chapter Master Corax authorized expenditure of accumulated wealth, attempting to purchase Imperial mercy, offering Admiral Castrius exclusive trading rights worth planetary GDP, while promising Iron Hands commanders access to rare gene seed samples. The bribes escalated desperately. Entire star systems offered as personal fiefs, archaeotech caches promised to Mechanicus representatives, inquisitorial positions purchased through intermediary agents. Captain Thane's recorded transmission exemplified their blindness. Name your price for withdrawal. Every warrior has operational costs. The Emperor rewards efficiency. The Ravens had lost comprehension of concepts transcending monetary value, treating duty, honor, and sacred oaths as negotiable commodities rather than foundational principles. They genuinely believed imperial justice operated according to commercial principles, that sufficient payment could absolve any transgression, including murdering an inquisitor. Admiral Castrius's rejection crystallized imperial response. The throne's justice is not for sale. Imperial commanders recognized that accepting Raven's payments would validate their premise that everything possessed commercial value, including loyalty itself. The Imperium's institutional survival required demonstrating that sacred principles remained beyond. Purchase their economic philosophy once their strength now sealed their doom as attempts at financial salvation revealed complete spiritual corruption. The Ravens discovered that commercial relationships lacked loyalty bonds of sacred brotherhood when imperial justice offered amnesty for cooperation, their support networks collapsing under pressure they had never anticipated. As blockades tightened and bribery failed, imperial forces prepared direct military action. The Ravens' transformation from warriors to merchants had optimized them for economic competition rather than existential warfare, creating fatal vulnerabilities when confronted with opponents immune to financial persuasion. Can economic power overcome military force when the Imperium seeks justice? What is the final cost of treating loyalty as a commodity? Grey Knight's translation signatures bloomed above the fortress monastery, like corrections entered in red ink, their strike cruisers cutting through Battlefleet Obscurus cordons with silent authority. Chapter Master Corax received the tactical assessment while simultaneously calculating extraction costs for chapter assets, his enhanced neural pathways processing survival odds alongside salvage potential. Even confronting annihilation, the Ravens could not abandon commercial thinking. Their corruption had become so complete that facing executioners triggered cost-benefit analysis rather than martial resolve. Corax's response to Justicar Alaric's demand for unconditional surrender consisted entirely of counteroffers. Priority Vox transmissions carried purchase orders for Grey Knight's equipment, exclusive gene seed trading rights offered in exchange for reduced sentences, territorial concessions proposed to satisfy imperial justice while preserving chapter commercial operations. His communications resembled procurement negotiations rather than military surrender, each desperate proposal calculating acceptable losses against operational continuity. The Ravens genuinely believed sufficient payment could purchase clemency from warriors whose purpose transcended monetary considerations. As Grey Knights breached outer defenses with methodical precision, Ravens commanders issued ammunition requisitions through established commercial channels rather than emergency military protocols. Quartermaster Serf Hadrian processed purchase orders for bolt rounds while plasma charges detonated in adjacent corridors, his augmetic implants calculating delivery schedules even as the fortress burned. Battle Brothers died clutching data slates containing market projections rather than holy texts, their final words requesting contract confirmations instead of reciting battle prayers. Captain Thane exemplified their spiritual bankruptcy. Mortally wounded by Nemesis Force weapon, he used final breaths, attempting to negotiate medical evacuation costs with his Grey Knight's executioner, offering percentage of chapter treasury for transportation to neutral facilities. His death represented the ultimate irony. Warriors who had transformed sacred duty into profitable enterprise now faced opponents immune to financial persuasion. The Grey Knights conducted purification with clinical efficiency, their actions representing necessary accounting that balanced imperial justice ledgers. Each fallen Raven corrected institutional error, their deaths restoring mathematical equilibrium to systems corrupted through systematic fraud. Psychic wards swept through sanctuaries like audit stamps, while Nemesis blades struck down not just heretics, but an entire corrupted balance sheet. The Ravens' last communication, broadcast as Grey Knight's plasma charges, reduced their fortress to expanding debris, consisted of automated purchase orders for reconstruction materials and casualty replacement requisitions. Their cogitators continued processing commercial transactions even as the chapter died, treating annihilation as temporary business setback requiring standard recovery protocols. A servitor's monotone voice echoed through burning corridors, repeating unfilled ammunition orders to suppliers who would never answer. The audit closed. The ledger was finally balanced through purification fire, but questions remained about institutional safeguards and systemic vulnerabilities. What legacy does a corrupted chapter leave beyond their destruction? How does the Imperium prevent similar institutional decay? The Ravens' purification left their commercial networks intact, transferred to Imperial custodial holdings under Ordo Hereticus supervision. Merchant houses faced stringent audits while their established trade routes continued under Navy oversight, the machine of commerce grinding forward with new operators. More insidious proved the genetic contamination. Falsified gene seed samples distributed across subsectors now manifested in recruitment stocks throughout the segmentum. The Crimson Warden's initiates developed stress fractures and endocrine storms, while Iron Skull's battle brothers reported unusual satisfaction from successful negotiations rather than combat victories. The Administratum implemented comprehensive reforms, attempting to prevent institutional recurrence. The Office of Astartes Financial Supervision established quarterly asset audits, while mandatory leadership rotation cycled chapter masters through Segmentum Command and Mechanicus facilities. Emergency powers edicts acquired temporal limitations and double seal requirements, while the Schole Genetica instituted the Sable Index, genetic tracking matrices binding each progenoid to triplicate custody chains readable by auspex and inquisitorial oversight. Protection agreements became public tariffs. Reclusiarchs maintained ledgers of conscience, audited alongside ledgers of coin. These measures addressed symptoms, while fundamental pressures persisted unchanged. Resource scarcity, bureaucratic inefficiency, and operational demands continued forcing chapters toward expedient solutions that compromised sacred principles. The same administratum offices implementing oversight protocols continued underfunding chapter operations while maintaining unrealistic performance expectations, creating identical conditions that had corrupted the Ravens generations earlier. The cycle manifested predictably. In distant subsectors, under-resourced chapters began implementing efficiency measures, while maintaining they served only the Emperor. The Void Serpent's briefings praised innovative resource optimization using language identical to early Ravens documentation. Brother Initiate Hadros received his first performance evaluation in sterile chambers, where training sergeants explained that duty and profit operated on measurable scales, that waste dishonored the Emperor through inefficiency. His data slate displayed training metrics alongside revenue implications, biochemical rewards conditioning commercial behavior through traditional protocols. The young Astartes learned to calculate ammunition costs against elimination ratios while reciting sacred oaths about service and sacrifice. His performance summary concluded with modest numerical assessment, variance target plus 3.2%. The mathematics of corruption remained constant. Institutional pressure plus resource scarcity plus bureaucratic flexibility equals systematic decay disguised as loyal service. The slate was clean, unmarked by char or blood, awaiting its inevitable mathematical confession.